Let's see the next topic. The next topic is CPU, and in this particular chapter these are the important topics. Okay, so we have seen in the organization of computer that a computer is made up of 4 units, namely input unit, output unit, memory unit, and the central processing unit CPU. And in today's chapter we are going to see central processing unit, that is CPU. Okay, so the first thing that you need to remember the full form, and it is very simple one. It is central processing unit. Okay, so CPU stand for central processing unit. It is one of the unit of the computer. And the main function of CPU in computer is to execute the instruction and process the data. Okay, so the data which we got from the input device, that need to be processed. Okay, so that processing happens in this particular unit. And if you talk about physically what is a CPU, it is basically an electronic chip, and more specifically it is a microprocessor. Okay, so microprocessor is one of the hardware which reside in a board that is called motherboard. And if you open the CPU cabinet, which we call it as a cabinet, the box you have seen on the desktop computer, there a motherboard reside, and in the motherboard there is one chip called microprocessor. Okay, so that chip is the basic element of the computer, which is logically known as central processing unit. Okay, and if they ask you the first microprocessor, it is Intel 404, and this particular microprocessor is designed by Marcian Tedhoff, which is known as father of microprocessor, in year 1971. Okay, so in 1971 Intel 4004 was designed by Marcian Tedhoff. Okay, and coming to the India's first processor, it is Shakti, which is designed by IIT Mumbai, and it was started in year 2016. Okay, so India's first processor name is Shakti. And a very important pointer is that CPU is known as brain of the computer, and this particular pointer we have seen in many exams, starting from SSC to RRB to banking, whatnot. Okay, so CPU is known as brain of the computer, right? So let's see the component of CPU, what makes a CPU, and this particular topic is very important in banking, SSC, UPPCL, RRB, DMRC, and many other exams. And these are the component of CPU which you need to look. Okay, and most important are these two, one that is control unit, it is CU, and the second one is arithmetic logic unit, that is ALU. And the next three are related to the storage unit, that is register, cache memory, and main memory, which is also known as memory unit. And all these units are interconnected with the help of bus, and the heartbeat of the CPU is basically generated by a hardware called clock. Okay, which gives the signal, okay, that is real time periodically to the other unit, which is used for the synchronization between the other components. Okay, so the first unit is control unit, and this is very important in all the exam what you see. And the main function of control unit, as a word itself suggests, that it is going to control of what? of data and instruction. Okay, and if you see control unit, how it is controlling the data, it control the input unit to generate and the data and to store into the memory unit. Okay, and if you see the instructions, so whatever the instructions are stored in internal memory, it is going to execute whatever it may be. Okay, so the main function is the flow of data and instructions. And a very important pointer we have seen in all the exam, it is known as nerve center of the computer. So CPU is the brain of computer, whereas this CU, that is control unit, act as a nerve center of computer. Okay, it is similar to human being, like we have nervous system where all the data, all the blood, all the instruction signals goes to the various organs. Similarly, this control unit has the flow of data and all the control signals are sent to the different component of the computer. Okay, and as I told you that it basically coordinates between other unit like input unit, output unit, memory and ALU. And if you see the analogy, like it works at a traffic supervisor, like a supervisor in the traffic, it manages the various vehicles. Similarly, control unit manages the data and instruction, how should we go about. Okay, and the most important task is that it generate a control signal to the other component of the computer to make the task done. Okay, so the next one is ALU, and as I told you the full form, it is arithmetic logic unit, or sometimes it is known as logical unit. Okay, so arithmetic and logic unit or the logical unit, one and the same thing, and this is commonly asked in RRB exam. As the word suggests, that it is going to do arithmetic operations. What are the arithmetic operations? Addition, subtraction, division and multiplication. Okay, so these are the arithmetic operation, the basic operation it can do. Coming to the logical operation, it is and or not and comparison. What do you mean by and? So maybe you have seen in the Boolean algebra class, like if both the statements are true, then only the condition will be executed or the instructions will be executed. If either of the instruction is false, it is not going to execute it. Or means either or one of the condition is true, it is going to be executed. Okay, not is a negation, means it is the opposite. If it is true, the negation of true is false. Okay, and there are various other comparisons like greater than, smaller than, equal to, greater than, equal to, less than, equal to, and many other comparisons. Okay, so the next topic is registers, and we have already made a video on the registers. So in this we are going to have a brief about the registers. Registers are the small high-speed storage units. Okay, these are, first thing, that these are very small. It is not like big if you compare with the hard disk. These are very small, and basically they are inside the CPU. Okay, inside the CPU. And one more characteristic is that it is very high speed. Okay, and the main purpose is that it is going to hold the instruction address and data temporarily while processing. Why it stores data temporarily? Because since it is sitting inside the CPU, so it can act as an intermediate buffer to execute the instructions faster. Okay, and we have seen various type of CPU register in one of the video that we have already made. There are many registers, and from this registers and their purpose we have seen one questions in the exam. Okay, so let's see the next topic is memory, and again I have made a video on the memory unit where we have discussed primary memory, secondary memory and other memory. And what are the differences between all these memory we have covered in that chapter? So you can just go to that chapter and get benefited from it. Okay. So the next is bus, and there are many units in fact inside the CPU. So bus provide the connection of different component of the computer. Okay, and if you see physically, these are a set of wires. Okay, so bus is nothing but a set of wires which is going to connect the different components of computer like ALU, CU and memories. Okay, and where these buses are present, these are present inside the motherboard is a piece of board which is green in color, and there are various components are embedded in digital circuits, electronic circuits are there. Okay, and if you see some metallic traces are there which are in golden color, normally these are the buses, and these buses, this metallic traces connects the CPU, memory and IO device. Okay, what does this metallic traces or line contains? It contains the data and instruction, which is basically your electrical signals, right? And as I told you, these traces carry electrical signals. Electrical signals, what do you mean by electrical signal? Voltage change, which can represent data address or control signal. Okay, for example, if my data is say 5, okay, so as you know, the binary conversion of 5 is 1 0 1. Okay, so if 0 represents 0 volt and 1 represents 5 volt, it is going to have like this. Okay, so this is 0, this is 1, this is 0, this is 1. Okay, so this signal will be passed on the bus which will be generated by the CPU to handle the data. Okay, and the most important one is a bus width. Okay, so as I told you that 105, so here 4 bits are considered, so that is nothing but the width of the bus. Okay, so width of bus basically specify number of bit it can carry at once. So in this case the bus width is 4, but generally it is 8 bit and 16 bit. Okay, and bus can be classified internal or external. Like if it is internal, it is going to connect to the internal component, whereas external bus provide an interface to connect with the external component of the computers. And internal bus, as a word suggests, that it is going to connect the component which are residing inside the motherboard like processor or memory, and it is also called the system bus. Okay, and there are basically 3 internal bus, namely data bus, address bus and control bus. Address bus, data bus and control bus. So data bus carry, as a word suggests, data. It carries the data in the form of electrical signal, of course, between CPU, memory and IO devices. Similarly, address bus will carry the address. Again, address is nothing, it is again a signal which is going to have the IO locations where you need to access the memory, and this address bus determine the maximum addressable memory. For example, if you have a basic example, like if you have 4-bit address bus, it can specify 2 power 4, that is 16 addresses of the memory location. Okay, and nowadays if we are having 32 address bus and 64, so logically it can refer to power 64 addresses of the memory. And the last one is control bus. As a word suggests, there are various controls like read, write, control and interrupt. So reading, if you want to read a particular address, this control bus will make the signal read as a high, and it will access the location of the memory which contain the data in the data bus. Okay. The external bus, as a word suggests, that it is going to connect the component outside the motherboard like peripheral, expansion slot and IO ports, and it is known as expansion bus. So let's see the next topic, that is CPU performance factor. And the first one is the clock speed, which is also referred as the CPU speed. Okay, so this particular performance factor was asked in various exams starting from SSC, SEHSL and RRB, NTPC and JE. And what is clock speed? Clock speed is the rate at which processor execute an instruction. Okay, so it is basically how fast your processor is executing the instruction. It is similar to like a teacher and student, where teacher is giving a task and how fast a student is able to solve the problem is the speed of the student. Okay, so rate at which processor execute the instruction is the clock speed or the CPU speed. And a very important pointer that it is going to be measured in hertz, megahertz or flops. Okay, flops is what? It is floating point operation per second, which is commonly used in the supercomputer. Okay, so supercomputer speed is generally measured in the unit flops, which means floating point operation per second. Okay, and nowadays computer is measured in gigahertz, like 4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, 8 gigahertz. Okay, and 1 megahertz is equal to 10 power 6, that is million. M stand for million, 10 power 6 hertz, whereas giga stand for billion, that is 10 power 9 hertz. Okay, I repeat once again, clock speed is the rate at which processor execute the instruction, and it is measured in hertz, megahertz or flops. And 1 megahertz is equal to 10 power 6 hertz and 1 gigahertz equal to 10 power 9 hertz. The next one is the cores. So a CPU can have single core or multi-core. If it is having single core, it can execute one instruction at a time. Okay, if it is multiple cores, 2, 4, 8 or more, it can execute multiple instruction at a time independently. Okay, so it is like a lane. So if you have one lane, the traffic can go only one at a time, right? But if there are multiple lanes, so traffic can go in the multiple paths, so execution will be faster if we have multi-cores. The next factor is the word length. So as we have seen, there are buses. So word length basically determine the size of data it can handle in one operation. Okay, generally we have seen the CPU characteristic, it is either 32-bit or 64-bit. It is basically the word length it is going to handle in a single operation. It is basically the size of data it can handle in one operation. Okay, the next one is the instruction set architecture. Okay, so there are some standard set of architecture. Okay, standard set of instruction sets which CPU can understand and execute. For example, read or load or store, such type of instruction set is the basically make the CPU run. And there are two types of instruction set which we are not going to discuss in detail because it will be the out of scope of our chapter. It is CISC and RISC. It is complex instruction set computer or reduced instruction set computer. Okay, so just remember there is some set of instructions, standard set of instructions which a CPU have, and based on that it can execute the instructions. Okay, the next one is the manufacturer of CPU. And as we have seen, CPU are also known as, or also think of like a microprocessor, and there are many manufacturers in fact, but the main leader is Intel. Okay, so Intel is the main leader in the market of CPU. The full form is integrated electronics. Okay, integrated electronics, like IC we have seen integrated circuits. So basically circuits are electronics parts, so integrated electronics is the full form of Intel. And it was founded in year 1968 by Robert Noyce and Gordon Murray. Gordon Murray is one of the scientists there in Intel, and Robert Noyce has founded this particular company. And why it is the marketed? So this you can see from this table itself, because the first microprocessor is developed by Intel in year 1971, that is 4004. Okay, and it is the first 4-bit microprocessor. Okay, 4-bit means it is going to handle 4-bit at a time in a single operation. Okay, so first 4-bit microprocessor is Intel 4004. The second is 8008, that is first 8-bit microprocessor again developed by the Intel. Okay, and in the colleges and school we have one important processor, that is 8085, and a very popular one in education. It is again made by the Intel. And 16-bit, which basically laid the foundation of x86 architecture, again the manufacturer is Intel. And the very important one is Intel 80386, which is first 32-bit microprocessor, is designed by the Intel company. Okay, so you can see lot of research happened there, and different type of microprocessor was made by the Intel. Afterwards in 90s, Intel Pentium series was started by the Intel, and Intel Core series, which is now dominating in market, like i3, i5, i7 and i9 processors. So all such processors are made by the company Intel, that is Integrated Electronics. Okay. The next company which is very popular is AMD, that is Advanced Micro Devices. I think it is a European country. And the first gigahertz processor, first 1 gigahertz microprocessor, that is AMD Athlon, was designed by this particular company. And the first 64-bit was designed by this AMD company Optron in year 2003, whereas first 32 was made by Intel, but first 64-bit x86 microprocessor was developed by AMD. And currently we have this series, Ryzen series, which is operating after 2017 and onwards. The other company that is making the CPU is ARM. Basically this ARM, that is Advanced RISC Machine, we have seen two type of architecture, so it is one of the architecture. So they are using RISC architecture of the machine, and this particular microprocessor series are used in smartphone, tablet and embedded system. It is lightweight and consume less power as compared to the other processor. So nowadays ARM Cortex series is very popular. So after the last one is ARM. So afterwards we have Qualcomm. Qualcomm make Snapdragon processor, which is dominant in the smartphone, tablet and embedded system, which is basically a system on chip. So it is not a processor itself, it is having GPUs, it is having modem, it is having Wi-Fi, it is having Bluetooth, and it is having CPU which is ARM based. Okay, so it is basically known as system on chip. So a chip has multiple system in it. So this Qualcomm is leader in making those system on chip Snapdragon processors. Okay. So let's see the next topic, that is instruction cycle. So instruction cycle is basically a process by which CPU execute a program instructions. So we have seen a lot of things about instructions, but how CPU is going to execute the instruction depend upon the cycle. Okay, so the first step in the cycle is fetch. Okay, so fetch, what it will do? It will do the instruction fetching from the memory using program counter. So program counter is a register, memory is the memory unit, and this fetch cycle will fetch the instruction from the memory using program counter. Okay, once instruction is fetched, it is going to be stored in one another register called instructions register. Okay, so once this fetch process is over, we have our instruction in the instruction registers. Okay, once instruction is there, you need to decode the instruction, what operation need to be performed, which is determined by this process that is called decode. Okay, so the instruction which is stored in the instructions register, it is going to decode it and determine what operation need to be performed, and based on that, control signals will be generated, which is going to direct the other part of CPU. Okay, so we have seen fetch, decode, and the next one is the execute, which is most important part in the instruction cycle, which is operation it is going to perform. It can be arithmetic operation, memory access, or some IO operation. Once the operation is executed, the result is going to be stored either in the registry or in the memory. Okay, so this cycle continues as long as task is over. Okay.